After the rebellion of Prince Naguya, the Fujiwara clan eliminated opposing forces and began to take the lead in politics. At that time, the four Fujiwara brothers were at the center of politics. All of them were deeply involved in running the government. They participated in politics as representatives of their respective houses. Their families were called as follows. Muchimuro's house was called Nag, which means it was located on the south side of Hijo-kyo. The house of Yuzusaki was called Haki, which means it is on the north side. Umakai's house was called Shikika, which means that he had served as the minister of ceremonies for many years. Mero's house was called Kyoke, which refers to the position he held for a long time as Sakyo no Daibu. Thus, each house became unique. They worked together to run the government. Under the rule of the four Fujiwara brothers, there was a move away from imperial kinship politics, in which imperial family members were involved in politics. Furthermore, based on the Hirotsugu, a clan-centered political system was established. As a result, the powers held by the imperial family were gradually transferred to the Daiyukin. Under the Hirotsugu system, a system for running politics was established. In the process, new offices were established as needed. On the other hand, systems and government offices that were no longer in line with the times were abolished. In this way, proactive reforms were implemented. In this way, the foundations of the Japanese nation under the Hirotsugu codes became even stronger. By the way, let's shift our focus from Japan to East Asia as a whole. At that time, the intentions of each country in East Asia were intertwined, forming complex international relations. The Tang dynasty, the largest country at the time, attempted to bring the Baohe kingdom, which arose in northeastern China, under its control. However, Baohe rebelled against them. As a result, the relationship between the two became strained. Furthermore, relations between Japan and Sheila had deteriorated and become tense since the Battle of Bikjiang. Under these circumstances, the Tang dynasty built a cooperative relationship with Sheila, while the Baohe dynasty deepened friendly relations with Japan. That means they are now at odds with each other. However, Japan was not directly hostile to the Tang. Japan strengthened its relationship with the Tang by sending Kentoshi to the Tang dynasty, while keeping Sheila in check. In this way, Japan conducted diplomatic relations with countries such as Tang, Ohai, and Sheila. The Zaifu and Kyushu played an important role as the gateway to this area. As diplomatic missions brought knowledge and culture to Japan, they also brought some things with them. It was an infectious disease. The epidemic spread through Kyushu, the diplomatic gateway, and quickly reached Hijo-kyo, causing a major epidemic. This resulted in an estimated 1 to 1.5 million deaths. Many people, including peasants and nobility, were killed. The epidemic has also had a serious political impact. All four Fujiwara brothers died from the disease. The government that the Fujiwara clan had built up collapsed abruptly due to this epidemic. Moreover, after the deaths of the four Fujiwara brothers, the key politicians left behind were all Sangi, the lowest rank. They had little experience running the country as Daiyukin. So political turmoil was inevitable. First of all, the top priority for the government after the deaths of the four Fujiwara brothers was to replenish personnel. As a result, one Sangi was added and personnel changes were made. Thus, after the deaths of the four Fujiwara brothers, Prince Katsuragi, who was of imperial family, came to power in the government. In fact, Prince Katsuragi had already changed his name and was calling himself Tachibana no Moroe. Let's take a look at his family tree. His father was Prince Minu and his mother was Agitnukai no Michio. He was of imperial family descent, as his father's family was connected to Emperor Bidatsu. However, this was a time of transition from imperial family-centered politics to clan-centered politics. Considering this political situation, Prince Katsuragi has decided to give up his royal title with an eye to the future. He inherited the Kaban Tachibana given to his mother by Empress Jinmei and chose to live as a vassal. In this way, when a former member of the imperial family gives up their status and becomes a vassal, this is called demotion to subject status. Thus, Tachibana no Moroe took control of politics and set about rebuilding a government that had been devastated by the plague. Specifically, he reduced the manpower and materials allocated to the military and sought to stabilize politics and finances. While he was thus in control of political power, a major event occurred around Emperor Shomu. It was a meeting between Emperor Shomu and his mother, Fujiwara no Miyako. At first glance, a mother and son meeting face to face doesn't seem like anything special. But in reality, Fujiwara no Miyako fell into a deep depression after giving birth to Emperor Shomu. She was mentally unstable for a long time and never got to meet her son. As a result, a whopping 37 years had passed. This meeting was made possible thanks to the work of scholar Kibi no Makibi. He asked the monk Jinbo to look after her. As a result, her mind became calm again. It is said that this meeting was made possible because she had reached a state of enlightenment. This incident caused Emperor Shomu to have a strong trust in Kibi no Makibi and Jinbo. Tachibana no Moroe also made great use of them. Fujiwara no Hirotsugu was extremely dissatisfied with the situation. He thought that the monk Jinbo and the scholar Kibi no Makibi were not knowing their place and were currying favor with the Emperor of Japan and Tachibana no Moroe. If things continue like this, the Fujiwara clan will lose its position. Fujiwara clan will be replaced by Tachibana no Moroe, Jinbo, and Kibi no Makibi. We have to get rid of them. Thinking like this, he gradually came into conflict with Tachibana no Moroe. This conflict gradually became more and more extreme, and eventually Tachibana no Moroe demoted him to the Zaifu. There he saw the desolate scene of Kyushu, devastated by epidemic and drought. He witnessed this terrible situation and submitted his opinion to Emperor Shomu from the Zaifu. The politics right now are getting worse. Jinbo and Kibi no Makibi are the cause of this and should be expelled. He appealed thus. However, the imperial court interpreted this opinion as a criticism of the current government and a rejection of Emperor Shomu's politics itself. As a result, the imperial court decided to subjugate him. This is the Fujiwara no Hirotsugu rebellion. At that time, relations between Japan and Chile were deteriorating. Therefore, Kyushu had a system in place that allowed the Zaifu to mobilize a large military force. What's more, Hirotsugu was Umakai's son. Umakai once served as the governor of the Zaifu. As a result, they have built deep ties with the people living in Kyushu for 2 generations. Hirotsugu took advantage of this system in the Zaifu and his connections with the people living in Kyushu to rise up in rebellion. His army divided into 3 parts and marched north. But the imperial court quickly responded. Upon receiving the report that Hirotsugu had raised an army, the imperial court immediately organized an army to suppress the revolt. Ayato and Chokushi were sent as advance guards. Ayato refers to the indigenous people who lived mainly in southern Kyushu. Chokushi refers to the Emperor of Japan's envoy. At that time, some of Hayato's staff worked for the imperial court. Therefore, they were sent to Kyushu along with the Emperor of Japan's envoys. They tried to persuade Hayato, who was on Hirotsugu's side. Thus, the imperial court prepared to put down the rebellion and began marching towards Kyushu. Thanks to the persuasion efforts of the imperial envoy and Hayato, many people began to defect from the rebel army. Under these circumstances, Hirotsugu's army and the imperial court army faced each other across the river. When the imperial envoy called out to Hirotsugu many times, he appeared on horseback. When he realized that he was speaking to an imperial envoy, he dismounted from his horse and bowed twice to show his allegiance. And he said he had no intention of disobeying the imperial court's orders. He defended himself by saying he was simply seeking the expulsion of Jinbo and Kibi no Makibi. But the imperial envoy replied, "We have only come to convey the imperial court's orders. If you had no intention of disobeying the imperial court's orders, why did you raise an army and come all the way here?" The imperial envoy questioned him thus. The imperial replied and so mounted his horse and left the scene. Seeing this, the soldiers of Hirotsugu's army decided that the situation was unfavorable and one by one surrendered to the imperial court army. Nevertheless, Hirotsugu decided to fight and took on the decisive battle. However, he was defeated and fled to the west. He tried to flee the country, but the wind blew him back and he was captured. He was ultimately executed and the Fujiwara no Hirotsugu rebellion failed.